Well, welcome back everyone to another Yurch session. If you're new here, my name's Gillian White, and these recordings come from our monthly gatherings in my backyard, in my yurt. I live in the foothills of Alberta, and we affectionately call these gatherings Yurch. Our little play on the word church, just without the CH. It's not about religion or doctrine. It's about gathering and community to explore spirituality, her story, mythology, philosophy, and the questions that invite us to remember who we are. It's a place where curiosity is welcomed, where different perspectives can sit beside one another, and where no one is expected to have all the answers, especially me. So, um, this particular gathering, we did gathered in June, so I'm a little bit behind in getting these recordings out, but I felt it's still important to share. Over the past few months, we have been journeying through the teachings of Mary Magdalene and her seven powers, and what they might teach us through reclaiming our own inner authority and remembering who we are. So you can go back and watch those recordings. And now we turn toward or inward Sophia. She is an embodiment of divine wisdom. And again, these are just there's different interpretations of Sophia, and I certainly don't claim to be an expert. I'm just sharing what rings true for me. That's it. So my hope isn't to tell you what to believe. My hope is to simply spark curiosity, invite contemplation, and perhaps help you reconnect with the wisdom that's already alive within you. So I invite you to pour yourself a cup of tea or coffee or a nice drink of water and get comfortable, and let's just journey into this beautiful mystery of Sophia together. Welcome. So today is not about learning Sophia perfectly. It's not about getting it right. Today is an invitation to sit with her wisdom, your wisdom, and to notice what awakens within you. And it's to opportunity to remember. So before we begin, I invite you to just notice when you hear the word wisdom. When you hear the word wisdom, where do you feel that? Where do you feel that energy of wisdom within you? Is it your head, your heart, your belly, your whole body? Where do you feel that? Is it in nature? When you hear the word wisdom, no right or wrong, just notice. And I just want you to take note of that for later on in our recording here. All right, good. So Sophia, she is a complex teaching. It is very complex. Big concepts, ancient mysteries, and honestly, I think it's important to say right from the beginning again, I don't think I can fully give her justice because I'm still learning with you. This feels vast and layered and sometimes hard to fully wrap our minds around, especially mine. It's very new. And a lot of what I'm sharing comes from the Gnostic lens. And Gnosticism is a broad spiritual and mystical movement. It emerged around the same time as early Christianity, roughly the first or second centuries of the Common Era, CE. And though many of its ideas are older, many of the ideas are older and rooted in earlier traditions and mystery teachings. The word Gnostic comes from the Greek word gnosis, meaning direct knowing, or inner spiritual wisdom, not belief or doctrine, but a deep personal experience of truth. And honestly, this is one of the reasons these teachings resonate so deeply with me, because there's this idea that the kingdom isn't outside of us, it's within us. So I think that's just so beautiful. Your soul knows your own truth. And it's like in the teachings of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, farther up is further in. And it's a remembering that wisdom and connection are already woven inside of us, inside of you. And at its heart, Gnosticism teaches that there is a divine spark within humanity. The material world can veil or distract us from our true nature. And awakening comes through inner knowing, wisdom, remembrance, and our own direct experience. This is a soul's journey. And it wasn't one organized religion with one fixed doctrine. It was more like many mystical schools and communities sharing similar themes and sacred questions. So Gnosticism draws influences from, that's a big word for me, especially with my dyslexic ways. But you get me. But Gnosticism draws influences from early Christianity, Jewish mysticism, Greek philosophy, Egyptian spirituality, Persian dualistic ideas, and just ancient mystery traditions and initiatory teachings. So in many ways, it's connected to Christianity and much bigger than Christianity. So there's a lot there. And this is where Sophia enters this story. We're going to bring Sophia in. Sophia, also known as divine wisdom. Yes. That is who she's known for. And she emerges from what the Gnostics called the pleroma. And in Greek, that means fullness. So Sophia, divine wisdom, emerges from the pleroma, this fullness. And pleroma is the name the Gnostics gave to heaven. So divine fullness from heaven. And this divine fullness, it has this like womb space energy. And in this pleroma, this heaven, there are spiritual beings that flow within this divine fullness, this womb space, and they're called aeons. And this is what the Gnostics called divine spiritual beings, aeons. And aeons existed in sacred pairs and represent aspects of divine consciousness, such as wisdom, aeon of truth, of grace, aeon of divine mind, of silence, life, aeon of love. And then there's Sophia. She's the aeon, and she is the one of wisdom. She's one of these divine spiritual beings, and her name is Wisdom. And according to many Gnostic stories, Sophia longed to create on her own. She longed to create on her own, and not with her divine counterpart, because they often come in pairs, or they did come in pairs. And her divine counterpart was Theletos, and which means divine will. So Theletos was one of the aeons, meaning divine will or desire, or to will, like intention. And this is where the teachings begin to branch and become more symbolic and open to interpretation. One of the interpretations of the many interpretations, Sophia's independent act of creation without her counterpart. In this creation, she gives birth to the demiurge, a false god, also known, and it's a name, I struggle with this word, but Yaldabaoth, and I'm sure I'm butchering it, but we'll go with demiurge. He is often described as a distorted or incomplete creator figure, disconnected from the fullness of the divine, disconnected from the pleroma. the heaven. So this demiurge, this false god, then creates the material world and the archons. What are the archons? Well, the archons are forces associated with illusion, ignorance, ego, spiritual disconnection. Sound familiar? In some ancient texts, the demiurge is even described with a serpent or dragon-like imagery, such as a lion-faced serpent. Another interpretation, some people interpret Sophia herself as the creative force behind the world that we know, not as evil or fallen, but as a divine wisdom descending into matter. And in this understanding, Sophia becomes connected to Mother Earth, Gaia, nature, the soul, intuition. And the world is not bad, but wounded, fragmented, or asleep, forgotten. And many modern mystics and seekers hold this more as a symbolic interpretation rather than taking the myth literally. So, longest story short, there are many versions of a story. Sophia, also known as divine wisdom, one of the aeons, the great creative intelligence, the mother of creation, who longed to create. And in some versions, she creates from deep love, and others she creates from desire to know herself, and others she creates just too quickly. Not much thought into it, got excited, but the common thread is she creates without her counterpart, without her balance. She creates the world prematurely without the help of her syzygy, her matching masculine counterpart, her creative partner, Theleidos. And what births is a material world inherently out of balance, as well as a host of deranged spirit children called Archons. I mean, you gotta laugh, really, and it kind of makes sense. Without the full union of the masculine and the feminine principles, and this is what emerges is something incomplete. It's not evil, it's not bad, just distorted. So something to ponder. Did Sophia hide from the shame after she created, or did she fall? And this depends on which Gnostic teachings or mystical interpretations you're exploring, because there isn't one single agreed upon answer. In many classical Gnostic teachings, Sophia does not literally become the earth. Instead, through her act of creation, she descends or falls from the pleroma, from the heaven, from the divine fullness. And through this descent, part of her divine light becomes woven into creation. And sparks of her wisdom become embedded within the material world. So the world itself carries fragments of Sophia's divine essence. And in some stories, Sophia remains both. She remains connected to the higher divine realms of the pleroma, and she's also present within creation, trying to awaken humanity. Remember. Almost like she exists both above and below and within. And this is where the idea of the divine spark within humanity comes from. That a spark of sacred wisdom, Sophia, still lives inside of us. So let's circle back for a moment, back to these archons that were created by the demiurge, that false god that Sophia accidentally created. I feel like it's important teachings, and it's fascinating and a little weird, just like all stories. So this false god, demiurge, who is actually described as a malformed and ignorant deity born out of cosmic error. So this false god, who has forgotten where he comes from, he creates these archons. They're a consciousness that's disconnected from its source. They don't remember where they come from. They don't remember Sophia. And the humans were said to have been created by archons in their image. But humans possess that inner divine spark, the inner wisdom of Sophia that the archons lack. One of the Gnostics' texts described the Archons almost like a virus of consciousness, a force of forgetting, a force that convinces us that we're separate from one another, separate from the earth, from the divine, separate from ourselves. And, if you've ever been around someone who lives in constant fear and shame and anger, greed, hatred, you know that these things can spread like a virus. One fearful person creates more fear. An angry person can create more anger. One act of violence can ripple out. And we see that, in a way it does behave like a virus. But, I like to think also perhaps Sophia works the same way. Perhaps wisdom spreads, compassion spreads, kindness spreads, and remembrance spreads. So I really love this idea, because haven't we all met people who carry certain vibrations, energies, people who just walk into a room and they can create a peace and sense of calm. People who remind us that we matter, people who help us to remember ourselves. There's those people that are deeply connected to life. And they're not perfect people, but just people remembering something different, feeling something different. And maybe these people aren't free from struggle, but maybe they're simply learned to recognize the voice of Sophia. So I find that interesting. So that can be like a different kind of virus. They've learned to return again and again back to love, to presence and connection. So perhaps every act of healing is an act of remembering. Every time we choose love over fear is remembering. Remembering our true source, that divine wisdom. Every time we choose connection over separation, that is connecting to that divine spark within us, to that wisdom, to Sophia. When we choose compassion over judgment, when we return to nature, and when we listen to our own wisdom of our hearts, the same teachings that Mary Magdalene tried to share was, that mind of the heart right here, this truth right here, the heaven within you. And when we connect to this, we weaken the spell of forgetting. We weaken the power of those archons, and we strengthen that remembering, that divine wisdom. The archons are the forgetting, and Sophia is remembering. The question isn't, am I infected? The question becomes, what helps me remember? Nature helps me remember. Community helps me remember. Love can help remember. Kindness, compassion, understanding, communication, all bring us back to remembering. Silence, the sacred pause, helps us remember. My own inner truth, my intuition, helps me remember. I like to think that Sophia has been speaking through all those things all along to help us remember. Wake up, she says. Don't believe those archons, those egos, that fear. There's actually something else I found interesting, and I have to say I wasn't too sure if I wanted to share it because I struggled with this one, but it came up a few times. And, in some of the Gnostic teachings associates the archons with planets and zodiac, where these archons are linked to astrology. Ancient Gnostics believed the 7 classical planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac are literal manifestations of these archonic forces. So the archons use the movements of celestial bodies to enforce karma, fate, and material destiny. And at first I thought, oh, wait a minute. I love looking at the stars and astrology. I love seeing patterns. I love how astrology can sometimes help me understand where I am in the season in my life. So I did sit with this one for a while and I wondered, were they saying astrology is bad, or were they pointing to something different, something deeper? Because here's what I've noticed in my practice. Any tool can become wisdom, or it can become dependency. Any teaching can help us remember ourselves, or it can become something we hand our power over to. That's with anything, right? So like many of our Mary Magdalene teachings of her 7 powers that we went through, each teachings have 2 sides. The question I keep coming back to is this helping me hear my own wisdom, or is it replacing my own wisdom? And that feels very Sophia, because Sophia is wisdom herself. Not information, not prediction, not certainty, wisdom. Eye of the heart wisdom, the divine spark within wisdom. And I don't think Sophia would ask us to throw away astrology. I think she would ask us not to worship it, just like anything. To use it as a conversation, not as a command. Sophia isn't asking us to look away from the stars. She's asking us not to forget the wisdom within ourselves while we do. So not to give up our own inner knowing for external authority. You know, religion, as we know, can become external authority. Astrology can become external authority. Teachers can become external authority. Books can become external authority. Sophia keeps inviting us back to the eye of the heart, same as Mary Magdalene, back to the direct knowing, direct inner experience, back to living the wisdom within. So the question is, do they help us remember our wisdom, or do they replace our wisdom? And the more I've sat with the Archons, the less I think about them as beings, and the more I think about them as forces of forgetting. Really, they're just forces of forgetting who we are. You know, anything that pulls us away from our direct experience is an Archon. That's forgetting. Anything that convinces us that we need someone else to tell us what is true is forgetting. That's an Archon. Anything that separates me from the wisdom already present within me is an Archon. It's forgetting the truth of who I am. And, you know, like anything can become that, such as religion can become that, and not because religion is bad, but because we can hand our authority away. And again, books can become that, astrology can become that, oracle cards can become that, and teachers can become that, such as myself, right? You see that often. And even Sophia can become that if we're not careful. And the thing is that every one of these things can also be beautiful gateways. A book can awaken something for us. A teacher can illuminate something. An oracle card can spark a little reflection. Astrology can help us understand patterns, right? And religion can offer us comfort and community. So none of these are the problem. The question is whether they lead us back to ourselves or further away. Again, just like the Mary Magdalene teachings, everything has 2 sides. I think this is one of Sophia's deepest teachings. Sophia isn't asking us to stop looking at the stars. She is asking us to remember that the same intelligence moving through the stars is moving through you. Sophia isn't asking us to reject wisdom traditions. She's asking us not to forget that wisdom is also alive within you. So, to recap, archonic consciousness is anything that separates, that's controlling, that's fear-based, that's domination, external authority, and it's forgetting. And Sophia's consciousness is connection, remembrance, community, wisdom, direct experience, wisdom here, relationship, living from the heart, love. You know, how many of us have been taught not to trust ourselves? You know, so many ways of these archons telling us we know nothing. And Sophia's invitation is simple, is to remember that the kingdom is within, that wisdom is within, and the voice of divine is not only spoken through others, it also speaks through you. Your mind of the heart. So how do we shift it? How do we create change? How do we loosen the grip of these archonic forces of fear? Because they're strong. These archonic forces of separation and shame and forgetting. Well, it begins with awareness. Because the moment we see something clearly, its hold it has on us, that archonic hold it has on us, begins to weaken. The moment we bring light to something hidden, it begins to lose its power. So interesting. I'm sure you're doing a lot of reflecting now, but you know, think about it. Where do we see archons today? You know, perhaps we see archonic consciousness whenever humanity forgets its relationship with the earth. When forests become resources instead of relatives. You know, I just saw a video where they were cutting down a tree in BC that's over 2,000 years old. Like, think about that. All that wisdom being cut down to use for shingles. It's wild to me. You know, archonic consciousness is like we can see it when the rivers become commodities instead of living waters. Like, lifeblood of this planet, lifeblood of you. It's when animals become products instead of fellow beings. And perhaps we see it when we forget our connection to one another, when we stop seeing humans and only see sides, ethnicity, beliefs, when we stop listening, when we become more interested in being right than being in relationship. And perhaps most importantly, we see it within ourselves every time fear becomes louder than love, every time shame convinces us that we are unworthy, and when we abandon our knowing to follow someone else's truth. And maybe archonic consciousness isn't about evil. It's not evil. It's just us, we've forgotten. And maybe, which means Sophia, she isn't coming to save us from monsters. Sophia is inviting us just to remember who we are and maybe be more forgiving of ourselves. And the archons, you know, they're not out there. They're every place where love, connection, wisdom, and remembrance have been replaced by fear, when they've been replaced by separation. So when humanity forgets its connection to earth, we exploit it. When we forget our connection to each other, we divide. And when we forget our connection to ourselves, we numb. And maybe the archonic energy isn't out there, but it's every place that we forget love. And then the story gets beautiful because Sophia doesn't abandon creation. She descends into it, she enters, and she becomes present inside of matter. She's inside the earth. She's inside humanity. She's inside of us. And rather than destroying what was distorted, she calls it home. And, you know, that touches me because perhaps Sophia's story isn't just an ancient myth. Perhaps it's our story. Not a story of sin and punishment, not a story of being cast out, but a story of just forgetting and one of remembering. It's a story of losing ourselves and finding our way back home. It's falling down 7 and getting up 8. Maybe that's what the Gnostics were trying to teach, that we are not broken. We're just being called to remember. And perhaps the journey is not about finding Sophia. Perhaps the journey is remembering that we have always belonged to her, that we are part of her. And every time we choose love over fear, connection over separation, we are participating in remembering. And we become living expressions of Sophia herself. Maybe Sophia's story is our story, not fall from grace, but forgetting and remembering. Wonderful. So before we close, I want to bring us back to where we began. At the start of our gathering, I asked a simple question. When you hear the word wisdom, where do you feel it? Where does Sophia live within you? And perhaps your answer is different now, and maybe it's deepened or softened or become clearer. And maybe it remains a mystery, and that's okay too. But I invite you for a moment to just become still. You might want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. And I invite you to take in a slow breath in and let go. And take another breath in and allow yourself to settle. Allow your body to soften and allowing yourself to arrive. And imagine and visualize yourself standing in a beautiful natural setting. A place where you feel safe. A place where you feel connected. Perhaps it's a forest, a mountain, beside an ocean. And I invite you to feel the earth beneath your feet. Feel yourself supported, held, connected. And as you stand there, bring your awareness back to the place where you feel wisdom. That place you named at the beginning of our journey. Perhaps it was your heart, your belly, your head, your throat, your whole body. Where did you feel that wisdom? And simply place your attention there. And imagine a warm golden light gently glowing in that place. Not arriving from somewhere outside of you, not something you need to earn, but something that has always been there, quietly waiting, patiently waiting, like an ember beneath the ashes. This is your wisdom, your knowing, your connection, the part of you that remembers. And perhaps this is Sophia not separate from you, not somewhere far away, but alive within you. Speaking through your intuition, through love, through wonder, and through the voice of your heart. And if there's anything in your life that feels tangled, fearful, confusing, simply bring it before this light, this wisdom. Not to fix it, not to force an answer, simply to see with new eyes, to see it through wisdom rather than fear. Because when wisdom illuminates something, it begins to lose its hold it has on us. Take a moment and ask Sophia, what would you have me remember? Good. Perhaps the journey was never about finding Sophia. Perhaps it was always about remembering her in the trees, in the rivers, in the stars, and in one another. And within ourselves, may we remember again and again. And may we choose love over fear, connection over separation, presence over distraction, and wisdom over forgetting. And may the light of Sophia continue to guide your way. Breathe that in and breathe that out. So be it, and so it is. Thank you for joining me on this journey of remembrance. Merry meet, merry part, to merry meet again. Blessed be magical souls. Mwah.